President Obama, well, first of all, it's a secret ballot, isn't it, Carol? Okay. No, I'm not going to tell you now. What do the statements you mentioned tell us? They tell us that the person who made the statements doesn't know much about foreign policy. Or nuclear policy, or the Korean Peninsula, or the world generally. It came up on the sidelines. I've said before that people pay attention to American elections. What we do is really important to the rest of the world. And even in those countries that are used to a carnival atmosphere. In their own politics want sobriety and clarity when it comes to you. Elections because they understand the President of the United States needs to know what's going on around the world and has to put in place the kinds of policies that lead not only to our security and prosperity, but will have an impact on everybody else's security and prosperity. Our alliance with Japan and the Republic of Korea is one of the foundations. One of the cornerstones of our presence in the Asia-Pacific region. It has underwritten the peace and prosperity of that region. It has been an enormous buoy to American commerce and American influence. And it has prevented the possibilities of a nuclear escalation and conflict between countries that in the past and throughout history, have been engaged in hugely destructive conflicts and controversies. So you don't mess with that. It is an investment that rests on the sacrifices that our men and women made back in World War II when they were fighting throughout the Pacific. It is because of their sacrifices and the wisdom that American foreign policy makers showed after World War II that we've been able to avoid catastrophe in those regions. And we don't want somebody in the Oval Office who doesn't recognize how important that is. Andrew Beatty. Question, thank you, Mr. President. Yesterday you met with President Erdogan of Turkey. Hours after some fairly ugly scenes at the Brookings Institution. I was wondering, do you consider him an authoritarian? President Obama, Turkey is a NATO ally. It is an extraordinarily important partner in our fight against ISIL. It is a country with whom we have a long and strategic relationship with. And President Erdogan is someone who I've dealt with since I came into office. And in a whole range of areas, we've had a productive partnership. What is also true, and I have expressed this to him directly. So it's no secret that there are some trends within Turkey that I've been troubled with. I am a strong believer in freedom of the press. I'm a strong believer in freedom of religion. I'm a strong believer in rule of law and democracy. And there is no doubt that President Erdogan has repeatedly been elected through a democratic process. But I think the approach that they've been taking towards The press is one that could lead Turkey down a path that would be very troubling. And we are going to continue to advise them, and I've said to President Erdogan. Remind him that he came into office with a promise of democracy. And Turkey has historically been a country in which deep Islamic faith has lived side by side with modernity and an increasing openness. And that's the legacy that he should pursue. Rather than a strategy that involves repression of information and shutting down democratic debate. Having said that, I want to emphasize the degree to which their cooperation has been. Critical on a whole range of international and regional issues, and will continue to be. And so, as is true with a lot of our friends and partners, we work with them, we cooperate with them. We are appreciative of their efforts. And there are going to be some differences. And where there are differences, we will say so. And that's what I've tried to do here. I'll take one last question. This young lady right there. Question. President Obama, where are you from, by the way? Question. President Obama, well, Azerbaijan, like many countries that participated, have already taken a number of steps. And each country has put forward a national action plan. There are some countries that had stockpiles of highly enriched uranium that they agreed to get rid of. There are other countries that have civilian nuclear facilities but don't necessarily have the best security practices. And so they have adopted better security practices. There are countries that could potentially be transit points for the smuggling of nuclear materials. And so they've worked with us on border controls and detection. And because of Azerbaijan's location, it's a critical partner in this process. I should point out, by the way, that although the focus of these summits has been on securing nuclear materials and making sure they don't fall into the hands of terrorists, the relationships, the information sharing. The stitching together of domestic law enforcement, international law enforcement, intelligence. Military agencies, both within countries and between countries, the set of relationships internationally. Will be useful not just for nuclear material, but it is useful in preventing terrorism generally. It's useful in identifying threats of chemical weapons or biological weapons. One of the clear messages coming out of the summit and our experiences over the last 7 years is an increasing awareness that some of the most important threats that we face are transnational threats. And so we are slowly developing a web of relationships around the world that allow us to match and keep up. With the transnational organizations that all too often are involved in terrorist activity, criminal activity. Human trafficking, a whole range of issues that can ultimately do our citizens harms. And seeing the strengthening of these institutions, I think, will be one of the most important legacies of this entire process. Mark Landler, since you had your hand up, I'll call on you. One last question. Question. President Obama, I think it's a legitimate question, and I am concerned. Here's the balance that we've had to strike. We have a nuclear stockpile that we have to make sure is safe and make sure is reliable. And after the START II treaty that we entered into with Russia. We have brought down significantly the number of weapons that are active. But we also have to make sure that they're up to date, that they're command and control systems that might have been developed a while ago are up to snuff, given all the technology that has changed since that time. And we have to make sure that our deterrence continues to work. And so even as we brought down the number of weapons that we have, I've wanted to make sure that what we do retain functions, that it is not subject to a cyber intrusion. That there's sufficient confidence in the system that we don't create destabilizing activity. My preference would be to bring down further our nuclear arsenal. And after we completed START II, I approached the Russians, our team approached the Russians in terms of looking at a next phase for arms reductions. Because Mr. Putin came into power, or returned to his office as president. And because of the vision that he's been pursuing of emphasizing military might over development inside of Russia and diversifying the economy. We have not seen the kind of progress that I would have hoped for with Russia. The good news is that the possibilities of progress remain. We are abiding by START II. we're seeing implementation. And although we are not likely to see further reductions during my presidency, my hope is that we have built the mechanisms and systems of verification and so forth that will allow us to continue to reduce them in the future. We do have to guard against, in the interim, ramping up new and more deadly and more effective systems that end up leading to a whole new escalation of the arms race. And in our modernization plan, I've tried to strike the proper balance. Making sure that the triad and our systems work properly, that they're effective. But also to make sure that we are leaving the door open to further reductions in the future. But one of the challenges that we're going to have here is that it is very difficult to see huge reductions in our nuclear arsenal unless the United States and Russia as the two largest possessors of nuclear weapons, are prepared to lead the way. The other area where I think we'd need to see progress is Pakistan and India, that subcontinent. Making sure that as they develop military doctrines, that they are not continually moving in the wrong direction. And we have to take a look at the Korean Peninsula, because the DPRK, North Korea, is in a whole different category and poses the most immediate set of concerns for all of us, one that we are working internationally to focus on. And that's one of the reasons why we had the trilateral meeting with Japan and Korea. And it was a major topic of discussion with President Xi, as well. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good weekend.